Hello, I am Dr. Natasha Serret, and this is the first in a series of podcasts for the Association for Science Education. What is it about professional learning that genuinely enables teachers to change the way they think about and approach teaching and learning in science? And how does this impact on their practice? In this series of podcasts for the ASC, I talk to the science education community to learn more about the different professional development opportunities that encourage trainee and inexperienced teachers to adapt and refine their practice. In this first podcast, I'm in conversation with Claire Seeley and Emily Perry, the chairs of the Teacher Developers Committee. Now, Claire has been a teacher for over 30 years and is a primary science consultant, providing both a wide range of continuing professional development and initial teacher education courses across East Anglia. Claire works with many organisations within the charity sector and media, writing materials and providing bespoke training courses to improve their services to schools. She has a master's degree in environmental education and has a passion for exploring the natural world. Emily is head of Sheffield Institute of Education Centre for Research and Knowledge Exchange. Her interests focus on professional development, especially for science teachers. She works in local, national and international contexts to manage, develop and assure the quality of large-scale teacher development programs, with a particular focus on science teachers, including writing curriculum materials, facilitating, quality assuring and researching teacher professional learning. In our conversation, Emily and Claire will reflect on some significant milestones that have shaped their professional journey. And we ask ourselves, what do we mean by impactful and transformative professional learning? So let's start off, first of all, with finding out a bit more about you two, Claire and Emily. Tell us a bit about your professional learning, how and why you got into science education. Who's going to start first? Emily?
Okay, I'll start. So I come from a family of teachers, and I think there are lots of people who become teachers out of families of teachers. Something that I would be interested in someone doing some research on at some point. I did a PhD in chemistry out of my degree. So I did a degree in chemistry and then a PhD in chemistry, and moved from there to doing a PGCE. I then became a teacher, worked in teaching in the UK and overseas for maybe 10 or 11 years as a secondary chemistry teacher. Became a science teacher. I taught as a secondary chemistry teacher for 10 or 11 years. I started in London, moved overseas for a few years. I taught in Brazil and then in Hong Kong, came back to the UK and taught for a few more years here. At that point, I realised that I didn't want to take the kind of traditional standard routes through school leadership as an experienced teacher, and started looking for other opportunities. So moved out of the school sector and into the university sector, and also worked freelance for a few years as an independent consultant. And that was where I started to deliver professional development. And that was where my interest in science teacher professional development came. And so I worked for several different organisations kind of in that period over a few years, worked on some big professional learning and curriculum development contracts here at Sheffield Hallam University, and have kind of continued my career in academia from that point. So over the last 10 or 15 years, I've moved from being a science teacher to being a teacher of teachers to being something that is a bit more now like a researcher of teachers, I think might be how I describe myself. And also a team leader in my research centre, my team of staff here working in research in a whole range of areas, including science teaching, but lots of other aspects of teaching and education as well.
Thank you. It's like that elevator pitch, or what happens when you jump into a taxi and somebody asks you, what do you do?
It used to be easy When you can just say, oh, I'm a teacher, it's quite easy. But when you've been a teacher and you're not a teacher anymore, it does become much more complex, I think.
Start to move further and further away. Okay, Claire, tell us a bit about your journey.
So, yeah, I always wanted to be a teacher. Like Emily, my dad was a teacher. My mum was a nurse, however, and I always saw the power of education and the importance of it. And then, so I went to Whitelands College at Roehampton to do my teaching degree, and then I moved up to Nottingham, and I went to Nottingham Trent, and I did an MA in environmental education. And I always wanted to be a primary teacher, and I really loved that work in the classroom. And I did do quite a lot of school leadership, but it became really obvious to me that my passion was actually in primary science education. And what happened was I was mentored by an amazing woman called Janet Fendley, who at the time was the Suffolk advisor for primary science. She took me under her wing and gave me opportunities to begin to start to lead in science. So she gave me opportunities to talk at conferences and mentored me through that, made sure that I did the primary science quality mark. And actually, that in itself was really transformative because it helped me to understand what it means to be a reflective practitioner in the classroom. So linking all that theory from university into the nuts and bolts of actually doing it. And PSQM was really transformative for me because I started to really develop this awareness of not audience per se, but the staff that I was working with, the children, all the different stakeholders, all the different people affected by science education, and to start to look at my practice through those different levels. And I think that was really, really important for me and gave me a bigger perspective than perhaps I'd had before. And then through doing the primary science quality mark, I got to know the Association for Science Education. And I found this amazing national network of people all on a similar journey. And for me, that was also really crucial because I had people to talk about this journey with and people that I could check my thinking and learn from and watch, and some amazing colleagues who were modeling where I wanted to go next. And so for me, that door that Janet opened in the primary science quality mark then has led to a bigger view of science education and what it can do and who works in science education. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful for that early mentoring because it really was important.
It's interesting. I was drawing all sorts of maps when I was listening to both of you speak, because it is about a journey, and there is something, if we go right back to the beginning of the journey, and you said something, Emily, at the start about being part of a family of teachers, and Claire, you also having that sort of background, because there is quite a big debate out there at the moment about concerns about recruitment and retention. And we are talking about professional development, both in initial teacher education and continuing professional development as well for experienced teachers. But and this is just off the cuff question now, but what can we do for those people who might not come from a family of teachers? Um, how on earth are we going to help those people just even begin to see the importance and power of teaching? Because I think all of us probably may have something in our background that might have triggered that. And that's great. And that's that group of people that might continue to go on that journey. But there is probably a whole group of hidden people out there that are not able to see that power and importance. Have you got any thoughts about what we can do?
It's about opportunity, isn't it? Everybody needs a Janet like I had. Everybody needs somebody who's looking out. And that's a responsibility that as slightly older teachers or teachers further down the career path really have, to look out for people who are showing interest, who need opportunities, and to create them for them, you know, to open those doors and to leave those doors ajar, because actually it's that nurture and relationship, isn't it? It's always about relationship. And I think education is one of the most relational professions that there is. So it's having people with their eyes open to who's around and scooching them along and giving them that encouragement and saying, why don't you come to this? Or why don't you share, you know, and I think that goes right back to school as well. It's those careers teachers, isn't it? We did this very odd thing in careers where we would mark lozenges and then it would churn out a sheet with your, you know, the careers it thought you should do. But actually it's much more relational than that, isn't it? Careers advice. And I do think we have a very varied landscape of careers advice that youngsters can offer. But I think we need to take that really seriously, that whole piece about aspiration and introducing young people to a wealth of opportunity that exists. And also then working out the detail, because you can have a dream, can't you? But it's then how do you get there? So it's having somebody who's going to nurture and support you to work out your route. And I think that's also really important.
Have you got any thoughts about this, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what Claire said about careers, because I don't think in schools there is often a suggestion that people might become a teacher apart from a kind of superficial, you want to do a degree in chemistry, therefore you might consider being a science teacher. And actually, I think this is not to put the burden on teachers, but it is to suggest that all of us could do more to say, this is what it feels like to be a teacher. Like these are the teaching is a hilarious job, right? Every day something, I mean, every day difficult things happen, but also every day something hilarious will happen in your classroom. And being able to say to younger people, this is, yes, this job is hard and challenging and rewarding. And I think some of those government adverts do a really good job of showing how rewarding it can be to be a teacher. But also it's, you're part of, as Claire said, you're part of this community of other teachers and other staff and children and young people. You're part of this learning environment. And showing that kind of community feeling, that way of being a teacher, I think could be really powerful for young people. And I don't think that's really a message that we're very good at getting across. It does come across as a kind of like an individual endeavour and not a collective kind of piece of work that we could all be engaging in as part of that community of learning. I think sometimes when you work with teachers, it's really interesting if you say to them, when they're doing some professional development, when they're doing some professional learning, like, have you shared this with the children that you're teaching? And I think when teachers do that, actually, they get really positive responses back from the children that they're working with. You know, being able to say, look, I'm also on this learning journey with you. So we're going to try something out and I want you to tell me like how it's gone and how you feel about it. And then I can learn from that and we're all learning together. So I think helping people as they're making choices about their careers to understand that teaching is also a learning profession and you're in a community of people all learning together could be really powerful, actually.
Yeah, and there's quite a lot there to think about in terms of that starting point of the journey. Something for us to maybe think about as an association in terms of how we are reaching out to those young people. So as we embark on this journey and we become teachers and we're in the classroom, I mean, you've already talked about mentoring, Claire, but one of the things I'm interested in are those significant milestones for teachers, those critical points, something that happens. It could be at a twilight, an inset, or you've become part of some sort of research project, but something that fundamentally transforms the way that you see teaching and learning and science. And I do believe that doesn't necessarily happen at the very start of your journey. It often happens at quite a few years in, but something transforms the way that you view practice and has the potential to have quite a fundamental impact on the way that you go about teaching in the classroom, and therefore could have an impact on the learning. Do you remember any significant milestones like that for yourself?
Yeah, I do. I remember case. So Janet, the advisor, she did a project in Suffolk on case, and we had training, and we even
remember
wrote
it.
some case resources. And that was the first time I thought about metacognition, actually. I don't think it had really bothered me much before. It hadn't come onto my radar in that way. I think when you're a new teacher or a young teacher, you're very worried about what are my learning objectives? What are we going to do in this lesson? And I just hadn't, for whatever reason, really got, really taken apart that deeper learning, that what's happening in your brain, how are you putting those ideas together. For me, there was something happened when I did case training that made me see learning in a new light, a more the idea of the cognitive science, and thinking about where you were placing a piece of learning within a journey of learning. I think I just became more aware of that, and the conversation about learning, and it just pulled me up by my bootstraps, really.
Conversation about learning.
Yeah, and that for me was really interesting. And now I'm massively into that, and it's just continued with me. It's a behavior, it's a habit of my own mind now, which I just don't think I'd created or assimilated in that deep way.
Fascinating, and I could talk to you all day about case,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
the moment that it might make you stop and think about something. Do you have any significant milestones for you, Emily, along your journey?
Well, hilariously, I might have also said the case training that I did, which is quite a few years into my teaching. I don't know if we've said what cases, have we? So cognitive acceleration in science education for people who are younger than us. And for me, what that did was it did all the things that Claire said, but it also helped me think about the questions that I ask and the way that I ask them. And as a science teacher, I think certainly as a secondary science teacher, it's very easy to say, great, everyone's got the right answer, let's move on. And actually that case, the way that I then thought about teaching became much more questioning of the pupils and asking why they thought that, kind of, I mean, to the point of tedium sometimes. But I think actually that was really important. So I think that was a really important kind of mid-career piece of professional development for me. I would say that there've been more kind of incremental processes of just moving schools. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to repeatedly move schools in order to develop their careers, but actually for me, going from context to context, and therefore encountering new groups of children and new groups of parents and new groups of staff and new curricula. So for example, moving overseas, so I went from teaching A-level to teaching international baccalaureate. And understanding a different way of teaching and a different way that you could approach the curriculum and a different way that you could approach assessment was really powerful for me. And actually there's some connection with case there, because in international baccalaureate, for example, they have a module called theory of knowledge. So the children and young people are engaging in that, are engaging and really thinking about their own thinking and their own teaching. So I think that being exposed to new contexts and new environments and new ways of doing things is more incremental rather than kind of a fundamental shift, but really helped me kind of understand what it means to be a teacher in different ways.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's interesting, isn't it? When you move schools, I moved to a school, it was really, really passionate about oracy and developing oracy, because particularly of the setting, there was a real need for this. And again, it's a different lens, isn't it? And it just sharpens you up, and then you develop a whole new set of skills that you then can apply to everything that you do moving forwards, and that's really enriching. It's not good to get stuck in a rut, is it? And actually sometimes we can get stuck in a teaching rut, and sometimes a move is brilliant for that.
Makes me wonder about the implications for professional learning, and both of you talk about having these conversations these professional conversations, whether it's incrementally or a big moment, and being open to having those conversations with different communities of people, whether that's in different contexts, different schools, different, different countries even, but it's those conversations. But it's a conversation. And it brings me now to something I read about in your article that I just wanted to touch on, because in your recent article for Science Teacher Education in November 2023, you talk about your mission, really, as the chairs for the Teacher Developers Committee, as a way of how can we improve the learning on offer so that we allow teachers more agency? How can we provide better, more impactful continuing professional development and initial teacher training? We want to understand the part that professional development plays in giving back teachers their sense of professionalism and empowerment. And maybe this is something about our age, because I think, or maybe it's nostalgia, because you reflect back and everything seemed better back then. But do you both have a sense then at the moment that there is this diminished sense of professionalism and empowerment for the teaching community, and therefore there is a need to give it back to them?
I think there's a dichotomy. So I think there are some places that I've worked with where there's a real sense of teachers as professionals. There's an ongoing dialogue, and like you say, it's all about dialogue, isn't it? It's about making that mystical kind of craft of teaching more explicit, and really take it apart and talking about it, and really understanding what it means to be a teacher and what impactful learning looks like, and being on this shared quest together. And I think there's lots and lots of places where that is happening. And then there are other places where it is, your classroom life is quite pinned down, because there are very reductive kind of decisions being made out of fear, usually, in my humble opinion, that people want to solve the problem of curriculum, or they want to solve another problem, and so they buy a product in, and then they want fidelity, absolute fidelity to that product. And because they've spent a lot of money, because they think it will be the solution. And sometimes, and that in those places, teachers are becoming disempowered and actually de-energized as well, because nobody, it stops that thinking, it stops that creativity, it stops the fun of teaching. There is a happy medium, isn't there, in all things, and there are lots of places where lists of non-negotiables seem as long as your arm, and nobody can ever feel like they quite stick to everything, and they're really trying, and then they get told off if they don't stick to this long list of non-negotiables. So yeah, there is a dichotomy, but there are pockets of amazing schools doing amazing things, where people are just so excited about that professional learning journey, both that of their children and of themselves as educators.
There's several ways that you can see professionalism, right? And this is something that me and my colleagues have looked at in some of our research. One way of seeing professionalism is that people are kind of independent, free thinking, agents of their own kind of destiny and their own power. And that is one way that we might think about teaching. And I would buy into that for lots of reasons and in lots of ways, but it isn't the only way of thinking about professionalism. So if you look at some definitions of a profession, it might be that, for example, we've got an established way of doing something that there's consensus about across the sector. So, for example, and I'm sure people who work in medicine would disagree with me, but for example, the way to treat a broken arm, there's some consensus about that. And so I think some of the moves around professionalism in teaching over the last few years have been movements towards that kind of idea that there could be a consensus, that there is a way to teach this particular thing or work with this particular cohort of children. And that might be the case, right? And we maybe none of us know that at the moment. And if you look at the way that lots of the research around education has been funded in England, certainly over the last few years, is a push towards that kind of idea, isn't there? That we could agree that maybe there is a way that we teach this thing, or that we work with this particular cohort of children, or whatever. And I think school leaders who work in those kinds of environments would say, actually, what we're doing here is for the good of everybody, where improving the lives of the children and young people that we work with by using this kind of models where there might be a consensus around it being the right way to do things. And also we're helping teachers by reducing the number of decisions that they need to make in any given time period in their lesson or in their planning of their lessons, by saying, we're going to take that decision off you because we can decide that on your behalf. Now, that is one way of thinking about professionalism. And there is the other way, which is to say, no, we trust teachers to make decisions for themselves on their own behalf because they have that kind of professional expertise. And I think what we've got in our system in England at the moment is a really, like Claire was describing, quite a challenging mixture of both of those environments. And I think what we can do maybe as the Teacher Developers Committee and ASE is just help all of us working in that environment think about, well, there are benefits and downsides to both of those ways of working, right? And we can work with the people who would support teachers in various ways to say, where can you find the places where you want to achieve some of that agency, and where you can make those decisions and take those risks in your practice, and where actually is it beneficial to you for whatever reason to say, that's fine, I don't need to make that decision because someone else has made that decision for me, and I'm going to go along with that, and actually that's saved a bit of my workload, saved a bit of my time. So I think that kind of what is professionalism is such an interesting question for those of us who work in professional development, and we don't have an understanding of that probably across the sector either. I think if you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers.
I think we're richer than we used to be. In my 30 years, we talk about research so much more now. We look at education as a research informed profession, and we're intellectually curious. And I think that's really exciting. What an exciting time to be a teacher. It wasn't like that, I don't think, in the same level when I first qualified. So I think there are opportunities to explore and to research and to debate that haven't really existed in this way before now. And I think there are real moments that we can really sit down and look at research and talk about it. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's what we're really looking at as professional developers. We're trying to give teachers the opportunity to look at the research and then to align it with their practice and say, where does this fit with what you do? And have that lovely voyage around, teaching and what makes a difference to children, what makes a difference to their lives, and what makes a difference to their learning. That's the point of all this. So I think we have this moment. It's weird, isn't it? Because we're losing so many teachers so quickly, but actually, if we could just shift the dial just a tiny bit so that we were able to have more of these lovely conversations, I think it would make a massive difference to recruitment and retention.
Well, I've certainly taken away a message there from both of you, finding space for agency, but without feeling that it has to be a whole scale sort of full on off you go and make your own decisions. It's finding those spaces, but going right back to what you said at the beginning, Claire, perhaps that is also down to relationships. So I think it's finding spaces, but drawing from those relationships that you will be having with teachers as mentors, to recognize when it is appropriate to actually locate that space, and sometimes it is not. So it's how you just keep pushing back against that one size fits all, because that space might be different for different groups of teachers in different places, at different points in time. Just to sort of finish things off, really, and give yourselves both a few minutes. I think it's always quite good to have some takeaways at the end of little conversations like these, so that we can sum things up. The big question we had was, what we felt was meant by impactful and professional learning. And we've really sort of dug in there in terms of what we think are some of the current issues and possible solutions. So three things that you feel help to define or help to characterize impactful professional learning. Three takeaways if you were having a conversation with someone who was involved in professional development, whether that's for initial trainee teachers or experienced teachers, what three things would you say to them? You need to think about these things in your design of professional learning. What would they be?
I think professional learning spots gaps and suggests ways forward. As a time poor teacher myself, I need CPD or professional learning that meets needs. And so I think it's really important as providers of professional learning that we listen to teachers and we think about what are their actual current needs. Sometimes professional learning isn't always aligned to those, and I think it's more powerful when it is. So I think that's the first one. Secondly, I think professional learning needs rigor and research, and I think we need to learn from each other. So it needs that time and space for talk as well. And I think we need to look for those bridges between research and practice and how we link those two together. I think that's my third thing about professional impact, professional learning being impactful, definitely.
Thanks, Claire. Gives Emily a bit of breathing space there.
Gave me a chance to do some thinking. Okay, I think I'm going to say two things, but probably both will spiral off into like hundreds of things. The two things are opportunities for small professional development and opportunities for big professional development, and they work in alongside each other in the same professional learning activities. So small things, I mean, like just a new way of doing something, or a new thing that you can do in your practice tomorrow, or here's a thing, I did this thing, I'm an experienced practitioner, this thing worked really well for me, I really think it'd be great if you went and tried it out. And I appreciate it might not work in your context, but give it a go and see how it goes, and come back and let me know what happened, or tell the person who works in the classroom next to you how it went, and have a think about that and whether it's going to work for you in future. And I think all of us, and I'm going to say especially in science, but I'm sure that's not true, have those bags of tricks and tools that we can share with other teachers. And whether you're experienced or not, even if you're coming in to the profession in your first year of teaching, you will have a bag of tricks and tools that you've picked up along the way that you could be sharing with other teachers as well. So those are the small things. The big things are more around, for me, how you feel as a teacher. So one thing I like to ask teachers when I'm working with them is, how do you want to feel in your classroom? And what is it that we can do together that will help you feel that way? And that might be in a particular context, like when I'm teaching this particular thing, I feel really uncomfortable, or I feel really scared, or I feel really unconfident. It might be when I'm teaching this particular group of children, I feel really unconfident or scared, or I just don't know how to manage it because I feel that something's going to go horribly wrong each time I step into that environment with that particular group of children or young people. So that question for me, how do you want to feel as a teacher, I think is so powerful and so important, and it gets us towards, how can we help teachers to stay in the profession longer? Because if you feel more confident and happier and like you're enjoying your practice, then you're more likely to keep doing it, right? And that, again, as professional developers, we've all got a role to play in that, kind of helping teachers. Well, what can we do together to help you feel the way that you want to feel in your classroom? So that focus on feelings, I think, for me is really important.
Thank you. I think we've got quite a bag of tools, of ideas going forward. It's been really fascinating. A real pleasure listening to both of you, Claire and Emily. Honestly, I mean that. It's always great having a conversation with you. So thank you very much for our first podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.